Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Welcome back to the episode number 5 of the Midlife Crisis Podcast. My name is Jim Whalen here at Chop Sports Family down here in Matawan, New Jersey. Alongside of me is Dave Sturcio, owner and proprietor here, making me look good, making me sound good. Thank you for all the people who reached out, family and friends, and with the Coach K interview. I thought it was a different take on it. Came from a different angle. I think people appreciated that. My next guest is staying with the Alabama theme. He's been mentioned on his podcast before a few times already. He played at FDU under Coach Lababo in 1974, 1978. He also had coaching stops in Long Beach State from 90 to 96, made the NCAA tournament there. Also 96 to 2003 in South Florida. And lastly, at Virginia Tech from 03 to 2012. He is currently a ESPN analyst, probably one of the best in business. Please follow him on X. He'll mention that along the in the episode. I'm pleased to introduce you, Seth Greenberg, coach and analyst, ESPN. Coach, but thanks. I know we spoke a couple of times in the past couple of years, but thank you for the opportunity. I know we talked a little bit about Alabama. I mean, I talked to Coach Hurley, Coach K, Jay Horowitz, and Hubie Brown. And coming from, I grew up in Elizabeth. I heard about Alabama. I know you played for him, but I just wanted to get your story about Alabama. I thought it was a pretty good basketball story, something different that somebody really hasn't heard. But growing up on Long Island, how did you end up at Fairleigh Dickinson, and how were you introduced to basketball on Long Island?
I was introduced to basketball. My dad played at LIU for the great Claire B, and I grew up with basketball. I mean, I grew up going to a park in the Five Towns, watching my dad play with all these old New York City legends. And but Coach B was obviously someone that had a great impact on him. So, we grew up with the game. I mean, I can't remember a time growing up I didn't have a ball in my hand, and basketball wasn't important. It became more important, obviously, the older I got. And I still have a vivid memory of Coach B coming and visiting, and this is something that really impacted me. In the summers or in the spring, he would go back around and visit his former players.
Okay.
And Coach B actually came to our house and visited with us. I still remember being a little kid sitting by the fireplace, listening to Coach B tell stories to my dad, and it was, something that I still have a vivid memory of and had a great impact on me. Growing up, a basketball junkie, and then getting involved with the five-star basketball camp run by Howie Garfinkel and Will Klein.
Yeah, sure.
That was basically that camp built a bridge for so many people to cross, players to cross in terms of, in its time before quote unquote grassroots basketball, five-star was all about teaching, and it was all about competition. It was all about developing coaches and developing players. So my brother had a great junior year at Plainview Community High School. He was one of the best players in Long Island, and in the semifinal game in the county, he had about 40 against Southside. They ended up losing the game, and Howie Garfinkel invited him to the five-star camp, and I tagged along as a rising ninth grader. And that camp basically, the best players, the best coaches, and then all the college coaches would come and watch you play. And I was recruited at probably a mid-major level, but Fairleigh Dickinson started recruiting me. Then I knew I wanted to coach, and I started doing my research about Coach Lababo and his history of a great teacher and the success that he had and the people he worked for. Obviously, Coach Knight at Army, but the success he had as a high school coach, his success he had in terms of being one of the architects of ball U-man defense. And I was enamored by it. And when I got a chance to visit the school, it was a time in my life when my family was going through some difficult times. It was only about 2 hours from my house. The schedule we played was great, but I majored in broadcast journalism, but really my major was in basketball. And I sitting in practice, learning in practice, taking notes, listening, hearing, seeing things, how things were done, why things were done that way, were all a big part of my education, and Coach Lababo was basically my best professor because he was teaching me my trade. In a lot of ways, playing for him was like a trade school. He was giving me an education that I would carry over and then use, for 35 years of my life as a college coach.
Did your dad kind of direct you towards like, hey, and I guess you're interested in coaching at an early age. Did your dad say, hey, these are the guys you probably should target as far as learning to coach, or is this something you just kind of came up on your own?
No, yeah, no, actually going up to the five-star camp, I mean, you're sitting there, I still remember, I'm 13, 14 years old. I'm sitting there listening to UB Brown give a lecture. Then you listen to Chuck Daly give a lecture. Then it's Mike Fratello giving a lecture. And then it's Bobby Knight giving a lecture. And then so I was around, fortunately through five-star, I was around great teachers and great coaches, great high school coaches, great college coaches. And then when we went from being a player to working at five-star, that's when it really started really just falling in love with the idea of chasing my dream as a coach. And, I mean, you think about the young people that came out of that five-star camp and what they're doing today. I mean, it's a who's and who's of college basketball and the NBA. I mean, it was Brendan Malone. It was, Mike Fratello. It was UB Brown. It was Rick Pitino. It was John Calipari. It was my brother. It was, it was an incredible list of coaches that went through that camp. And, I always say Garth built us a bridge to cross to chase our dreams. And the exposure we got at five-star, teaching a station, doing individual instruction, giving lectures, living it at a very young age. And that's what you did. I mean, like we started the summer, my brother and I, Brad, we started the summer and we'd be gone for 12 straight weeks. And, it would be Honesdale five-star, then 4 weeks in Pittsburgh or Wheeling, then back to Honesdale. In between, it was Ohio University. It was Pocono Invitational. It was, so, I mean, that was our education. And, you fell in love with the game. You got lost in the game. You got lost in learning how to teach the game. But Coach Lowe was all part of that. The idea of, I was interested in Penn State some. John Bach was a great coach there, but Fairleigh was closer, to be honest with you. And, he had an assistant named Mike Wren, who was a younger guy that also was chasing his dream as a coach. I could see myself a little bit in him. But, like Coach Lowe was a tough guy. He was a hard guy to play for.
Yeah.
But he was a great teacher. He was an incredible, incredible teacher. There was no detail too small. His ability to communicate, his ability to teach in a way that there was progression. He had a brilliant, brilliant basketball mind. And, even today, I mean, I still remember my senior year of college, he calls me up into his office. When you had to get called up into the old man's office, it was never a good thing usually. I mean, like, you rolling up in there, oh my goodness, oh shit, he's going to whip my ass. And he sat me down. He just said, you know what? He said, a year from now, you're going to chase your dream and want to coach. And, when you're a head coach, he said, you're going to look back and say, the old man wasn't that crazy. He said, because the things we're doing every day, you'll realize you'll be doing those many of those things every single day.
Yeah.
You might put your own twist on it, but you'll be doing those things every single day. And sure enough, I was doing them pretty much every single day from when I was a JV coach at Columbia to coaching in the ACC against Coach K.
Yeah, you did it almost 4 decades, coaching. But you talked a little bit about Rick Pitino. When Rick Pitino got the job at St. John's and you worked for ESPN, he had a couple minutes with one of the anchors there, and he mentioned you and your brother Brad, and he said that he remembers playing with you on the basketball court. I thought that was pretty good. Did you know that what kind of a player was Pitino, and that he was also going to have that same path? Like it seemed like that five-star.
Yeah, he was the first one. He was the first one, Jim. He was the first one of our, and he's a little bit older than me, closer to my brother's age. We used to play at a place called Prospect Park when we were kids, where like it was a great park, terrific games every single night of the summer, competitive. Again, before all this grassroots stuff, kind of took over the summer basketball. But Rick was the first one of the young five-star guys that, broke through, and Rick was actually a better player after college than he was in college.
Okay.
But as a clinician, as a teacher, as a coach, as a motivator, his Station 13, which was individual workouts, were legendary. But yeah, Rick was a really good player, but he was a great teacher. And you could see that in Rick Pitino. You could see his ability and his passion for the game. But what we didn't see back then was his innovation. Like Rick approached coaching like a five-star station, but we didn't see the use of the three-point shot. We didn't see the press. We didn't see the matchup zone. We didn't see any of those things.
Yes.
What we saw was a guy that was incredibly passionate, was a terrific communicator and teacher, loved the game, loved to be in the gym, loved to teach, fiercely competitive. But he was a better player, actually, after he graduated than when he was a college player. And he was such an innovative coach, and he feared nothing. He feared nothing. And Rick's success begat all the rest of us, whether it's Cal or myself or, all the rest of us that followed in the footsteps of five stars. Some went on to the NBA. Tony Ferrantino was a former high school coach at Mount Vernon. Brendan Malone was head coach at Rhode Island. There were so many. Ronnie Rothstein was a high school coach at Eastchester High School. I mean, and so many guys went on from that camp that I always say that, like, what Howie Garfinkel and Will Klein were able to do is they created the greatest teaching camp in the history of basketball with the greatest amount of accountability that developed both players and coaches and held us all to the same standard.
And a lot of kids went through those camps, but like with Garfinkel, like, when did he start it, and like what was his background to get to feel like that there was actually a market for this, that that coaches and kids and everything else, like, when did he start it, and when do you think that
Garf coached AAU teams in New York City and citywide and Elmcore and all those other things, and he was kind of a scout. He ran a scouting service called HSBI, High School Basketball Illustrated. That begat Will Klein was a principal at Columbus High School. They were a perfect match because Will was buttoned down and took care of all the logistical things. And Garf, because of his passion for the game, he always said he had a great eye for guards. He also had a great eye for guys that fell in love with the game. They came up with this camp. It was in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. It was, those camps back then, camps ran like it's for an 8-week period. So they ran 1 week the week before the camps opened up and 1 week after the camps before they closed up. And it started with just busing kids from New York. Everyone paid, busing kids from New York that wanted to work on their games. And, he had connections with the high school coaches because it was, whether it was Coach Quigley's or, the Talentine coach, Bob Austin, or whether it was Bob Wade at Dunbar High School, or it was coaches in the Midwest. He developed all these relationships. Guys would come to camp. They would work camp. I mean, whether it was Jerry Wainwright, who at one point, obviously was coaching at DePaul and Richmond and UNC Wilmington. He was an assistant coach at Wake Forest. But Dave Odom started as a high school coach and ended up going to Wake Forest. That he would bring kids from North Carolina when it was at Wheeling College.
Okay.
So Garf he created this network where all these great players, and then it became the place to be. I mean, like when I was a camper at 5-star, Moses Malone was in my bunk.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's Mark Aguirre, it's Michael Jordan. I still remember Dave Odom coming to me and saying, "This guy at camp here, he's unbelievable, and no one knows who he is." I go, "Come on, Dave. I mean, we've seen them all come through here. Guys, we've seen great players come." He goes, "We've seen you, and we've seen this guy, we've seen that guy." He goes, "He's unbelievable." Well, that year, the best player in high school basketball named Joe Ward, Jumping Joe Ward. He was out of Georgia. I don't get a chance to see Jordan that first day because I'm a commissioner of another conference. So the next day when the game started, it was Joe Ward and Michael Jordan just happened to be on court 3, which was the main court in Pittsburgh. And Jordan had like 40 in like 2.5 quarters. And he was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But if you were a good player, you wanted to go to 5-star. That's just the way it was. It was, it was Michael Korn. If you look at the history of the MVPs at the 5-star basketball camp, it's a who's who, top 50 players in the history of the NBA.
I mean, Hubie Brown, he always thinks accolades a 5-star. I know he taught up there and everything. And when Coach Knight passed away, there was, Twitter video of him running drills in the 70s at 5 Star. So I mean, it definitely left its impact on the basketball community. But if you could talk a little bit about your time at Fairleigh Dickinson, I know you were kind of like the midstream a little bit with Coach Lowe. They had the unfortunate accident. Did they ever get a reset after that with Noki Johnson? And that was kind of in your area. You talk a little bit about.
Yeah, that was our era. No, that was so sad. I mean, yeah, it was. My career, I was a pass first point guard who basically got the ball to my roommate, a guy named Jay Jorgensen, who was a big time scorer from Colonia and the Island area. But it was we were everyone's guarantee game. What would happen is we were independent, so we weren't in a conference. So it was really hard for us to get games. So we'd go on the road and we'd play homecoming games. Basically, we played Wake Forest, we went out to Utah, we played, in Florida. We played all we played. I remember we went to Marshall. We played an incredible non-conference schedule because everything was non-conference. Then we played obviously the local schools, Ionas and back at that time, Montclair State and St. Pete, and got invited to Rutgers tournament one year. But we were a hard-nosed, tough group of guys that played really, really hard. The class before me, Lee Shulman was probably one of the best players, or maybe the best player in the history of the school. He was from Erasmus Hall High School. He was just a phenomenal player. But we didn't win a ton of games. We just hovered around that 500 mark. But it was a great experience. And unfortunately, the incident you're talking about is we come back. I think we were coming back from playing Iona. We would bus out of Rutherford. We lived in Teaneck. So we got back from the game. Our cars were in Rutherford, and we had to drive back Route 17 to 80 to get back to campus. And so, we had like 4 guys drive. You wanted to drive because you got like $5 gas money. And on the way back, it was a cold winter night with a little sleet and ice. And on the drive back, Noki's car hit an ice path, slid into a telephone pole, and unfortunately we lost him. 2 of our other players, George Leidy and our man Duck, were injured, but they were fortunate. They survived the accident. But it was a brutal time. It was really, really hard. You think about you're 19, 20 years old. One day you're competing and playing the game. You're in practice. You're laughing. You're giggling. You're a college student. Life is good. And then just like that, I still remember. This is before cell phones now. The phone ringing in our dorm, which was our apartment, and like just the emptiness of the feeling. And I remember going and, obviously we'd go to the funeral, and it was just absolutely brutal. And then spending time with Coach, and that really set Coach Lababo back. I was one of the few that Mrs. Lowe asked me to come over and just sit with him and talk to him and, grieve with him a little bit. I was like the guy that Coach would actually, he knew I wanted to coach, and he was hard on me. Yeah. I thought my name was son of a bitch, but it was really sad. But we had this connection, and I think, I probably me more than a lot of my teammates really appreciated him. I understood. I didn't mind being coached hard, and I understood he was coaching us hard because he cared, and you could see that in him after that accident, the human side and the emotion. And then to turn around and when the first game we came back and played, it was really, really hard. And Noki was a great player. I mean, a really, really talented player.
Yeah, from the looks of it, he's 6'6" guard. From Plainfield, that's a fertile ground for players. So I mean,
it was a very difficult time. But since then, I'm so proud of what Fairleigh's done and is doing. Tom Green had a Hall of Fame career there.
Yeah,
did an absolutely incredible job, and then obviously Tobin has done a great job. Did a great job last year. Obviously, the great win against Purdue, and which was unbelievable.
Yeah, and then I guess they ended up losing to Florida Atlantic, who made so they they held their own. And I think for an alum, you got to be proud of, like, you stand on the shoulders that came before you. You were part of that program and brought some notoriety to it. But their play also did a lot of talking for them too. I mean, beating the number one, 16 beating the number one never happened before, and they did the play-in game, and they lost to Merrimack, so their path was a little bit, uncharted. But but what they did, that's that's going to go down in NCAA tournament history. So.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I've stayed involved with the university. I've been fortunate to do some things. I actually hosted one of their celebrations after that win, when they got their rings, and I've been involved in helping them raise money and doing different events for them, and I'm just really proud of what they're doing and how they're doing it. We've helped rebuild their weight room. They never had a weight room at Fairleigh Dickinson. They got a weight room now. They redid their locker room, which is really long overdue. But I got a great education. I met great people. Myself and my teammates that I graduated with, Jay Jorgensen, Jeff Hunt, and Steve Salpin, those guys, we started a nonprofit called Teammates for Life. And what we do is basically raise money for either our former teammates or former players from the state of New Jersey or people that have fallen on tough times. We've helped with college educations. We've helped with, unfortunately, some funerals. We've helped with different projects to help people that are going through a tougher time. So if you think about it, I'm 67 years old. Obviously, that's 46 years since I was at Fairleigh Dickinson. Yet we're still involved. We're still trying to stay connected, and we're still trying to have, the guys that I went to school with. We've got a text chain that we all communicate with. I played golf with Lee Shulman at the big golf outing that Fairleigh had this past fall. So still connected, still proud of what they're doing, still appreciative of the scholarship that I received. It's fun to go back. It's fun to get a chance to speak to their team and talk to them through the prism of a former coach and also someone that walked in their shoes. So I'm really, really fortunate, and I'm really proud of what they're doing.
And after you left Fairleigh Dickinson, you started being assistant. You bounced around. I think you were in Miami. You were at Columbia, like you said before, but then you end up out at Long Beach. So, it had to be tough. I don't know if you're married at the time, it had to be tough on your family, bouncing around. The life of a coach has to be tough, and especially for the family. You're going from place to place. We end up at Long Beach, and then you got your break there. We talk a little bit about your break at Long Beach. You started as assistant, and then you end up going there, and you had a nice player who played for the Nets, Lucius Harris. So I mean, you had that was kind of your coaching introduction into the NCAA.
Well, yeah, look, the day I graduated college, Fairleigh Dickinson, next day I got the assistant coach job at Columbia, which was really fortunate, working for Buddy Mahar. And we had a great team. We actually beat St. John's our first year. We had a guy named Alton Bird, who's been involved with the Nets, I guess the Long Island Nets team. He was a great player, just a great player. Juan Mitchell, Ricky Free played at Boys and Girls. Then we recruited really well. We recruited a kid named Richie Gordon, who was also from Boys and Girls High School, which is really interesting. So I went from there to the University of Pittsburgh, 3 years in the Big East. We went from there. We spent a year in Virginia, working with Terry Holland, who I say changed my life. He became my mentor and kind of helped guide me through my professional career.
And Virginia back then, yeah, I think you had Sampson. They were in
It was
Stokes.
the year after Sampson. It was the year after Sampson, but we went to the Final Four, and I tell people I never made a major decision in my life from 1983-84 without consulting with Coach Holland, including asking my wife to marry me. And then we went from there to Miami. That's where I met my wife, and that's when our journey began. And we started the program back at Miami, and then we went from Miami to Long Beach State as the associate head coach with Joe Harrington, who was a great person and a great coach. We were fortunate to have success. Joe took the Colorado job. I got the Long Beach State job, and we had a really good run. We won the conference 3 out of 6 years, and had Lucius Harris, Brian Russell, James Cotton, a number of Joaquin Hawkins. All those guys played in the NBA. Really good players. They built the Pyramid, which was a great home court for us, packed the place. Made a little bit of a risky move, went to South Florida and Tampa, just when they were starting to bring football back, which was not ideal for trying to rebuild a program. Had success, but not the success I would have wanted. And then ended up at Virginia Tech, where we had a really good 9-year run. Two-time ACC Coach of the Year, one at Duke, at Carolina, at Maryland, at some of the great venues of all time. So I've been very fortunate.
And I remember, I think me beating Duke. I think it was on ESPN. You had your daughter was there. She was a cheerleader, and your wife was there. I don't know if they were number one team in the country at the time. And you beat them. I think you beat them at Tech, or did you beat? I think you beat Tech
Well, we beat
at
them a couple of times. We beat four number one teams in the country all on the road. I think they were like 3 or 4 that year. So I mean, yeah, my one daughter was a cheerleader, and my girls were, my girls were a big part of everything
yeah,
we did. I mean, it's really, really fortunate. They're all grown, obviously
yeah.
now. But our last wedding was this year, and I'm out of the wedding business.
Yeah, well, that's good. So I hope you got some grandkids to
We
keep
got
you
3
busy.
grandkids and one more on the way. Another
All
boy.
right. Well, God bless you. But just talk a little bit about state of the game now, like with the transfer portal and you know NIL, and that's the just talk about the state. You think it's good for the game? It's bad for the game? What's your opinions on that? I mean,
It is what it is. Like
mm,
either you adjust or you get out. It's real simple. I mean, like it's not going back. We got to get the transfer portal and NIL under control. The only way you get it under control is having contracts. If you have 2-year contracts, that'll get the portal under control. The NIL, there's got to be some guide rails to some extent because the way it is right now, it's not NIL. We call it NIL. It's not NIL. It's pay for play.
mm,
Let's call it what it is. Uh, players are commodities, and players and universities taking collectives and paying them. So the sooner we get that under control, the better off we are, whether it's contracts or finding another way to do it, whether it's revenue sharing to some extent. But I think there are ways for the collectives to raise money, like play 2 games at the end of the summer. Those are what I call collective games. Play your 2 exhibition games at the start of the season. Let an outside group promote it. Those are collective games. You got to find different revenue streams, and that's why we're seeing all this realignment, because all these conferences and all these universities are trying to find as much money as they can so that they can stay and compete. Universities used to invest in facilities. Facilities, you know what? Now they're just investing in acquiring talent. It's crazy. The sad thing to me is that in the end, do the players deserve something? Yeah, well, it depends on where you are. Like, you know, you think Fairleigh Dickinson needs to be paying players? They're not making any money. You think the Max needs to be paying players? They're not making any money.
well, that's the other thing too. It's just like I think before, like the 3-point shot, like the bigs, you said this it was revolved around the center. 3-point shot kind of opened the game, and it kind of was an equalizer. Now you think we're going back to where the bigger schools are going to have the upper advantage? It's going to be hard for get the talent, or
Well,
you think
they've always had an advantage.
hmm,
Even within our conference, I'm at Virginia Tech. We weren't beating Duke for players. We weren't beating North Carolina for players. I mean, like you can't legislate a level playing field. You just can't. Uh, but what we can do is first of all, we got to bring education back into the equation. So if we do contract, there's got to be an academic incentive, because in the end, when the ball stops bouncing, yeah, some guy, what percentage of guys are playing the NBA? What percentage of guys are going overseas? We talk about all this money that the kids are making from these collectives. It's great. So you make $400,000 a year for 2 years. So that's probably about $320,000. You buy a car, you do something for your family, whatever it is, and 400 is a lot. But then you got to live the rest of your life. So you got to get education involved in this equation. What I'd like to see schools do, as much as the collectives, create a mentor program. So every kid that comes in has a mentor, someone that's going to stand beside them and let them navigate this thing called life. Someone that's going to help them grow, develop, mature, and build a bridge for them to cross, so that when they're 20 and 30 and 40 and 50, all right, they have someone to go to and turn to help advise them and open up doors for them to be successful. I understand the financial stuff, and I think that's fine. But we've got to also bring education back into the conversation. We've got to bring mentorship back into the conversation. We've got to make sure that these parents and the players they're so fixated on the collectives in NIL, which is not NIL, it's pay for play, that they're losing sight of the thing that lasts them a lifetime, and that's their education. When used to, you bring a kid on campus, they meet the dean of the program that they're interested in. They meet the academic council. They meet the president. That's not happening anymore. All they want to know is, how much am I going to make? And you know what? We're losing track of the reason why you're going to end up in college. Yeah, you want to play. You want to have a chance to play professionally. You want to build a name. You want to, build your brand and all that stuff. But you also have to work. What's going to happen 10, 20 years down the line? Because, this is not like that. Too many times these young people look at college basketball and say, well, you're a pro and you're a pro and you're going to be a lottery pick and you're going to be. This is not Oprah handing out TVs. All right. All right. That's the most exclusive club in the world, the NBA. All right. And everyone goes, oh, just go to Europe. Yeah. In Europe, the kid that's making $300,000 maybe in the ACC next year, they go to Europe unless they're special. They're starting at 70 grand. And if they're good, they play their way up. If they're not good, they get sent home. So it's unrealistic what is going on. We've got to bring education back into this equation so that these kids are, we talk about mental health. I'll tell you what mental health is. A guy plays college basketball, gets taken away from them because they're not good enough. All right. Then they got to go overseas and they're not good enough. And then they're coming back to the States without a degree because all they concerned themselves back, it was their collective money or their NIL money or their pay for play money. And then they got to start their life all over again. All right. To me, that's real mental health issue.
Yeah. And also
how you solve that is having a mentorship program and education.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think mental health. I mean, a lot of these kids come in with a high expectation. Everybody telling them they're great, and all of a sudden when they fail, a lot of them don't have the adversity or support staff really around them to help them through those hard times. It's just, as much as how many people go to NBA, there's probably 10 times as many that fell on hard times for whatever squandered opportunities.
How about 1,000 times?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah, so we've got to fight it, but look, it's not changing. You've got to deal with it. As a coach, if you're in mid-major school, you treat it like a junior college. Have the guys for 2 years, help develop them, and then help them get where they'd want to go. But make sure that academic component is in place. Don't be afraid to coach your team. I think that's a big thing. These coaches are all worried about coaching the team because they're worried about guys leaving. And look, if those guys are going to leave because you coached them hard, they weren't going to help you win anyway. So coach your team, set a standard, have core beliefs, have non-negotiables, demand excellence. We're going to play hard. We're going to play together. We're going to take good shots. We're going to compete on the defensive end. We're going to be good teammates. All the things that, in life you're going to need to be. Embracing a role, being a good teammate, working with others. When you say, wow, if I coach him hard, he might transfer. Well, if he's going to transfer, he's going to transfer. But try to help him get somewhere he can't get himself. That's the job of a coach.
And then a little bit, 2012, you ended up getting the job at ESPN. How did that come about? Was this all that time? In life, timing is everything. Was it just the right time for you, to leave?
Well, I got fired.
You got fired. I guess the decision was made for you. So
yeah, I had a run with my AD, and we had a difference of opinion. We had tremendous success. I'm really proud of what we were able to accomplish. But I had 3 daughters, and one that was going to be a senior in high school, and I was a young guy, and they let me go after the hiring cycle, which is a story in itself. Yeah. I did some work for ESPN actually that spring on the NCAA tournament, and the people there, John Wildhack and Lee Fitting and Darby Williamson, and when I got let go. I never had a coaching agent, but I did have a media agent. My agent, Gideon Cohen, set me up an opportunity to do some work at ESPN that spring. Just so happened it was great timing. And when I got back from that, I got let go. And I didn't think I'd be doing this for the last 12 years. It's my 12th year at ESPN. I thought I'd get back in coaching. I've had opportunities, a pretty significant amount of opportunities. None of them have been better than maybe what I'm doing now in terms of balance and quality of life. But you miss coaching. There's no doubt about it. You miss coaching. You miss impacting someone's life. but I've been so fortunate. The greatest thing about ESPN, and people don't understand, is the people you work with. The producers, the directors, the researchers, the camera people. All they want you to do is have a good show. Like I tell people it's the greatest team I've ever been part of because literally everyone is so selfless. What we do is easy. The camera goes on, we're talking ball. I mean, I've talked ball my whole life.
Yeah.
The people that make it happen are the people, the special people. And that's what makes ESPN so great is this, and I don't want to call them support staff, but everyone around the production, those people are so good and work so hard and care so much. And that's what's made it really special for me.
Just that's nice words to hear, especially they've been getting a lot of negative press lately. So as far as being about layoffs and everything else, but just what teams do you like? Just talk about basketball. Like what teams do you like? What they see now early on? I know it's early; things can change. But what teams do you like, and what teams you could kind of see making a run, come March?
Yeah, I think this game, Purdue-Arizona this weekend is unbelievable. And that's just a big – those are the two best teams in the country along with UConn right now. Purdue, Zach Edey is the real deal. Everyone talks about Fairleigh Dickinson, St. Pete. But, they've literally – I think they have like 39 consecutive non-conference wins. They haven't lost a non-conference game in years. They've won 15 or 16 consecutive non-conference games against Power 6 schools and Gonzaga. And if you look at the who's they've beaten this year, whether it's Alabama, whether it's Marquette, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's Xavier, whether it's Alabama the other day, I mean, they played an incredible schedule. Arizona plays with – I studied Arizona a bunch this morning. They play with unbelievable force and speed offensively and defensively. They're as good a deep at the perimeter defensive team as I've seen in a long time. They got Omar Ballo, who obviously is a big front court player, Keyshawn Johnson – transfer from San Diego State helped them a great deal, giving them a little toughness. UConn, even though they lost Hawkins and Jackson, Dan Hurley's just a phenomenal coach. And they got a freshman, Stephen Castle, obviously Donovan Clingan is now a more focal point, but he's been banged up and hurt. Alex Caravan is a great complimentary guy that's played at a high level. And Tristan Newton's played as good as any guard in the country.
And Johnson's playing well too. The backup,
Sampson's playing really well. And because Donovan got injured, it gave Sampson opportunities to play. Marquette is the speed they play with. The backcourt with Kolek and Jones is really dynamic. Oso Ighodaro is a tough matchup. They're very good. So I mean, the SEC across the board, top to bottom, is absolutely terrific. In fact, I think they have more wins, more quad 1 and quad 2 wins or high major wins than anyone in the preseason. But the SEC is really deep. And Kentucky, now they're getting Aaron Bradshaw back, and they might even get Agana back this next week. With the depth in their backcourt and their shot making, Kentucky's going to be good. Tennessee's good. That whole conference, top to bottom.
Yeah. That's tough. And established coaches. You got Cal at Kentucky, and the Tennessee coach. I know he was
Barnes.
Barnes. I mean, he's
Chris Beard at Ole Miss. Chris Jans at Mississippi State.
I mean, you got some really good coaching in that conference too. So, but anyway,
there's a lot of good teams. I'm not sure how many great teams there are right now. I look at Arizona, Purdue, and UConn as the best teams, with probably Marquette right on that cusp. Creighton's in that conversation, so it's 3 from the Big East, which is, really kind of interesting, to say the least. The Big Ten has not had as good a non-conference, with Michigan State struggling a little bit right now. Iowa's struggling a little bit right now. Northwestern's actually a lot better than people think. They got a terrific backcourt. Big 12, Baylor maybe has one of the best backcourts in the country, and Houston's got a two-way backcourt, which is really good. Kansas, they have 4 starters as good as anyone. They would probably be right in that conversation with UConn and Purdue. So we've got good teams. We're going to have a great year of college basketball this year.
I'll just leave you with this. If we leave a little, what would you say Alabama's legacy is on on the game of basketball. And thanks for your time, Coach. I know I've been going back and forth just to kind of get this interview, so I appreciate your time. And not
Coach
only
Lowe's
today.
legacy.
Yeah.
Coach Lowe was one of the architects of man-to-man defense. Coach Lowe was a coach's coach. He coached coaches. Coach Lowe's teachings are represented all throughout the game of college basketball, whether it's ball you man, whether it's being in the stance, whether it's jump the ball front to cutter, whether it's zigzag, whether it's helping recover, whether it's shrinking down on the post. His teachings, basically his philosophies and his concepts permeate throughout all of college basketball, from the NBA on down to grade school basketball. And I would think that's, he coached UB Brown in high school.
Yeah.
So like, even though he's passed, his philosophy and his teachings will live on forever because they're the foundation of anything you want to do in terms of playing solid man-to-man defense.
Listen, Coach, thanks for your time. Happy holidays to your family.
Yep.
Congratulations on the 4th grandchild. Thank you for being considerate, when we're going back and forth.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And then, I guess we could find you on Seth on Hoops. You always put these on X. You always put these, game things on, which are always, as a coach, you could see different things. So,
Seth on Hoops, and tune us in. We got a great year of college basketball. We got some great games coming up this weekend and throughout the season. It's going to be a fun season of college basketball.
All right. Thanks for the time, Coach. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Appreciate it, man. All right, stay well.
Thanks for Coach Greenberg for his time. I was going back and forth with him to get this interview. He was gracious enough to get this interview during the holidays. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Hope everybody's going to have a safe holiday season. Congratulations on Coach with his 4th grandchild. And look for Seth Greenberg on ESPN. Also follow him on X on Seth on Hoops. He puts out some really good stuff. Really great guests. Please like, subscribe, share this episode. Check out former episodes on the Chop Sports Network. Also, follow me on Twitter at Whalebones. For me at X, it's WHALEBONZ. Thank you.